Welcome to Business Beyond Borders, the go-to podcast for CPA firms seeking transformative insights. I'm your host, Laurence Whittam, and with each episode we'll uncover key insights, best practices, and invaluable resources tailored for CPAs. From trending strategies to diving deep into outsourcing and offshoring, our experts will help in all areas of your business. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Business Beyond Borders. So I have a cool episode here today with Brendan Quirk, who I've known for a little bit now. We probably met a couple of years ago at one of the conferences and then sort of ran into each other a few times, and now getting to know a bit more about his background in more of the Latin America side of things. He's been a very helpful resource to me from some of the work that I do. But previously with HLB International, also now he started his company, Latin America Consulting Company. And really today what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the Latin America side of things. So some firms are looking to expand internationally when we talk about offshoring and outsourcing. And one of the areas, the new areas, I would say, for accounting firms specifically is Latin America, where people are exploring in Mexico, in Argentina, in Colombia. And it's, again, finance talent has been there for a while. But more so working with public or private companies. But this is obviously there's a lot of benefits to working from the nearshoring side of things, as people will hear. And again, we've got an expert here that can help educate a little bit more on that. So, Brendan, nice to have you on.
Thanks, Laurence. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate this chance to talk to you on your podcast. Yeah, so I'm a U.S. CPA, about 25 years in the profession. The first 5 of that, I worked in Boston as a small CPA firm that's now BDO. And then I moved into Latin America. I helped start a business, but also helped expand a business in Latin America. So I got to know the region pretty well. I studied in Europe. I did an MBA in Spain. And then when I came back to the U.S. after that, I started at McGladrey at the time. And when they found out I had been in all these countries and knew a lot of the intricacies of the doing business in Latin America, they threw me in a bunch of opportunities, whether it was M&A in Brazil or advisory in Argentina. We had tons of audit work to do in Mexico, so I would be doing some component audit work there. I just got to know the region really well. And then they gave me the opportunity to lead the region. So we were going through a transition and we were converging under the same brand as RSM. And, in that process, I got to know a ton more about firms and the people there. And it was just a great experience. And, since then, I've been continuing in the accounting industry. So probably 20 years on and off in Latin America, and the last 4 or 5 years here in North America. And it's been a whirlwind, but there's just so much opportunity there that I think gets missed.
And now recently, actually, you've just got, you're doing some work in Spain specifically, right, as well. Is that right?
Yeah. This is surprising because, I speak the language, but, Spain, although they speak the language and have a lot of relationships themselves, they don't know the specific firms. They don't know all the details of each country. And I know them really well. I've been to many of the countries, probably almost all of them, except Cuba, which we're supposed to not go to. And, I've lived in 2 of them. So it's, yes, I've been doing some work with some firms in Spain. And what I've noticed is just a general gap in the strategy of a lot of firms, companies, is that Latin America is important when you need it, but they don't necessarily dedicate resource to it. But it offers a really great opportunity, especially in the outsourcing space.
Yeah, it is, and I would say it's not just Latin America, or in that sense as well. I think the whole staffing side of things, I don't think firms have necessarily put a lot of resources behind, or really come up with a proper strategy and sat down and said, okay, let's look at this as part of our company. Let's look at how many resources we should be hiring, what talent should be offshore, what should be onshore, how does it all assimilate together. I feel like those discussions are being had more now, but in the past they haven't really been. prior to COVID, I really found very few firms having that real conversation internally. So tell us, let's just start out with, can you share a bit more about how you're helping firms specifically as well right now?
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, I've noticed there's a gap in the strategy of many of these groups. They're international strategy. I think international is an afterthought for a lot of firms. So, I noticed that in a couple of my roles, and I thought, why don't I start helping some of these firms? I had a couple of firms ask me to, for advice or, what to do. So I started helping out, talking to some of the firms at their conferences, giving the strategy of firms, the global network or association, what they're trying to achieve, helping them communicate that, but also helping the firms in Latin America. How are they expected to work together? How do they get the best practices going in their management and structure? What's the ideal firm look like in Latin America to really, really service the U.S. Market? What does that look like? And, I would say that's a really big area that has a lot of opportunity in it. But also when you're talking to firms about, their outsourcing strategy, and many firms are, looking at, maybe other places like India, the Philippines, and they're saying, geez, I've never been there. I don't know the culture. It's kind of far away. What someplace like Mexico offers, it's 2 hours away. It's, we share a border. We share a lot of similar cultural activities, with food and language and things like that. And, there's an opportunity to jump on the phone with someone from your team or fly them in the same time zone. And I think that adds an advantage. Now, the disadvantage is it's not as, it's probably a little bit more expensive, but you might be able to save more on logistics and depending on how you want to integrate with your people, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's closer. It's more similar to the US in that sense as well. So now you've got to compare that to regular hiring, right? In that sense, and this is where the aspect of cost savings when it comes to outsourcing should be really secondary to a lot of the other aspects that you should be thinking about. It's okay, what is the type of talent that I need, right? Where can I get it? Can I build it? Can I train them, right? And then where do I want to be going and building this other part of my company, essentially, right? It's the cost element. Yes, you will save something, right? Yes, you can save more by going to places like India and the Philippines, right? You may not save as much, and this is where you can weigh up a lot of different things. The cost to travel to Mexico will be less than the cost to travel to India, right? So there are lots of these extra costs that do come into play where they really balance out, right? At the end of the day, you will save money by outsourcing and building offshore teams in a lot of cases, but that isn't the reason for doing it, right? I mean, we have a staffing shortage. The reason for doing it is finding a replacement source for the talent that we need in order to continue to grow, right? At the end of the day. So when we talk about this specifically, like, what are you seeing firms look at a little bit more now? What are you hearing about some of the problems that are coming from firms? Obviously, being part of HLB and again being in those conversations with firms, and when it comes to the outsourcing and offshoring, like, what are the main difficulties or challenges that you feel like they're having the most?
And I'm sure we this is the topic of the conversation, but I'm sure you've heard it before. But there is a massive demand for talent, and when you talk about talent and you talk about what firms need with outsourcing, firms are looking for talent, capital, technology. But at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with attention, because they can't do all of these things at the same time. So when you look at the firms that have taken PE, for example, every single one of them says the same thing. They need the money to invest in technology, more deals, so growth, and then talent. And they can't do all these things at the same time, right? They want the best and the brightest. They want to be able to deliver solutions to their clients, But in order to do that, they've got to, invest in these three things. And that's where this comes in as, part of the strategy is the cost savings, but they just don't have the people. It's not even the cost savings. Even if they wanted to pay them in the U.S., they're just not there. I think that's probably the biggest the biggest challenge for clients.
And I think one of the points that you brought up, especially because you mentioned private equity, right, is for firms that want to stay independent, this is one of those strategies that really needs to be implemented properly, right? It's this is a way to stay independent to some extent, and it'll give you the best chance to, right? Because, and you've got to be looking at it from different approaches, not just looking at hiring accountants necessarily, but looking at hiring technology people, right? And now I can hire developers to work internally in my business, like much more cost effectively than hiring somebody out of California, right? Or anything like that, right? So you can invest in other areas to actually that are more intrinsic, that are not going to be like revenue driving individuals, but at a lower cost now. So that can be another way that they could be looking at this, right? So now, what about recently? Like recently, you've done travel. I mean, the big thing is you've traveled the world, right? I mean, you constantly are sort of going to Latin America as well. I know you recently did some traveling. You did some speaking there. Tell us some of the nuances about actually traveling to Mexico and those areas that people should know about, and what you were doing recently while you were there.
Yeah, I've done a couple speaking engagements recently for some networks. I'm also working with a firm in Mexico, helping them develop their strategy to be an outsourcer to the U.S. market. And one of the things I'm always impressed by is that they've got really great talent. They speak English well. They know the U.S. They've been there before, and so there's that cultural connectivity. And I think that's key. And another important point I think I wanted to mention earlier is I think every firm, if they scratch the surface of their people, their culture, their strategy, they're going to find at least a handful of people that are native Spanish speakers that would jump at the opportunity to work with Latin America in as part of their team and strategy. They would love to be part of that opportunity. But to your question, I think the challenge is working in Latin America is obviously the language. You run into that, the cultural nuances. Some of that is that mañana culture where oh yeah, I'm going to do that, and then you don't necessarily get it when you think, or you don't get the response to your email. But if you ask me, that's a leadership challenge. That's a leadership question. If you set or you set the goals straight and the expectations, and you're clear, that'll change. There's plenty of businesses operating in Latin America that are super effective and work really well. You just need to make it really clear what your expectations are, and it works out. And the other thing is, there are some risks in Latin America. Obviously, social unrest, crime, things like that. I have some funny stories of experiences there, but at the end of the day, in 20 years of working in Latin America, I go there several times a year. I lived more than a decade in the region, and I never had any problem. But I got my wallet stolen once in Miami. So,
yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing. It's people tend to hear about the bad things right over the good, and it's like there's quite a lot of bad things going on here, and you can go down the wrong street in New York and be at more risk than anywhere else. So, yeah. No, that's funny. So, I mean, explain some more of the benefits, and I guess let's start with the benefits, right? I mean, when it comes to a firm going and working with, let's say, somebody in Mexico, right, specifically, right? What are some of the benefits of the types of talent you can get there, right? And also maybe with that, I guess, what are the things that they should really be considering to make sure they have certain controls in place where they don't have the risk of that, let's say, response time and these types of aspects, right? That you've seen some of these common sort of challenges may come up.
Right. Yeah. No, I think what I've found in Latin America is you can get some really great talent in the areas of accounting and audit and consulting services. But you can also get IT resources. So you can get technical people in different areas of Latin America, in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Colombia. You'll find people that are really skilled at IT, consulting services like cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a big one in South America too, that they're really good at. They're really smart people there and really talented people. So you can find just about what you need. But then the price starts to creep up, right? Because we're not the only ones working in Latin America trying to develop this. So you have to be careful about that. And when you're doing business with these firms, I think this gets overlooked a lot. You have to go there. You have to meet with them. You have to understand what their office looks like, what the culture is like with their people. You got to find out how leadership works, how they operate. There's some cultural nuance there. I think sometimes you run into a lot of businesses that are, maybe family businesses. That doesn't mean they don't operate well. I think sometimes there's that perspective that, oh, it's a family business, it's not going to operate. No, they operate great, just like many family businesses do. But you just have to understand the dynamics of that business and who's making the decision. Sometimes the one who speaks English is maybe the son or daughter, the one who speaks the best English, but the owners are really the parents or the uncles or things like that. So there's some of that nuance you have to figure out. And you can only do that when you go there and just get an idea of how they operate. And then, I think, leadership, you've got to be able to communicate well what your expectations are and try working together on different opportunities. It's incredible the number of opportunities going back and forth between Latin America and the US. So there's a lot of potential resource in terms of getting references, understanding people, where they, how they operate, and just, again, setting clear expectations, I think, is fundamental. And that can be overcome. Obviously, there is a sense of culture and family, all these things we can relate to that are just slightly different. And if you can just understand what those are, you'll be able to work around some of the potential pitfalls or perceived challenges.
Now, so one of the benefits that I see more so with South America, and we touched on it earlier, is like specifically the geographical location, right? I mean, they're in central time zone, they're close, they could be as short a distance as 2 hours away, essentially, like on a plane. Like now, I believe I mentioned this before, like about like the visa process, right? For example, like, because that's one of the things that I feel like us going out to them is hugely beneficial. I think it's just from a mindset perspective for a leader in the US that runs a firm or that's a partner in a firm to go out and really see who they're working with and what the office is like, what the culture is like. Very important, right? But vice versa, being able to bring people to the US domestically for a couple of weeks to work with us, right, is again a beneficial thing where they're quite near, they're so close that realistically it's a bit more feasible than necessarily doing it with our team in India. And like the team in India, the visa process takes forever, right? I mean, it's just very difficult to get through. And again, there are certain nuances to that now where we can get people a little bit easier. Same with the Philippines. But what is it like in Mexico to get people, again, I believe we've got more people with access to visas anyway, being able to travel. But can you let me know about that?
Yeah, no, Mexico is one of those places that has that ease of travel. Now, broadly, as you just mentioned, there are some challenges in the visa process because there's so many people that want to come here and are trying to get here. So it can be particularly challenging. Mexico has an advantage with the visa. If they do it's called the ESTA visa. It's a particular type of visa just for Mexicans, I believe. Chileans also have visa-free travel to the U.S. The rest of the countries don't. So that's a particular challenge, and that makes it hard. However, we have that advantage in the U.S. of having Disney, but for every maybe 15-year-old in their quinceañero or their cumpleaños de 15 años, when they turn 15, sweet 16, whatever you want to call it, their request is to go to Disney. So many of them have done this visa process already, and others, visiting other places like New York or things like that. So many of them will already have it, and they'll get that 10-year business visa if they're doing business in the U.S. as a business. But like you said, the normal, say, rank and file might not have done that or don't have that. So that's something you want to look into. But Mexico has that advantage for a speedy visa process. But again, I mean, it's amazing the challenges that they're having in facilitating the visas around the world to come visit.
Now, we were talking about this previously about obviously being part of HLB previously, and just the strength of global alliances at the end of the day, right? I mean, there are generally firms, these international alliances have chartered accounting or CPA firms within these different countries that, again, they're focused on their own domestic type of clients. However, these are prime candidates who, if you were just entering the market into the outsourcing side of things or want to test it, right? You were saying like it could be an easy way. Like you've built some trust, you've met some of these other firms over the years, like within the network. Why not start there, right? And talk to them and see, can they help in some capacity? Can they show you what it could look like hiring somebody, right? And go by that way. Now, I've sort of like benefits and risk to that, right? Based on the sizes of firms doing that and things like that. But tell us a little bit about that and your thoughts around it.
Yeah, no, so while working in the network and association space, I saw a few firms, particularly from India, that saw the opportunity. They said, hey, we're here. We speak English. We can do a lot of the services you need for outsourcing. Just got to train us up a little bit, but we can deliver at a much more cost-effective rate for your firm. So I saw that happening, but you didn't see it necessarily in Latin America, and I think that's where firms can have an advantage. Many of those that are part of an international network or association that are working with firms in these countries can start that conversation. I mean, why not? Hey, talk to the managing partner or someone else in the group and say, hey, look, we could use more talent. I've got, Maria or Pablo on my staff here. They speak Spanish, but we need more, tax returns done or audit analysis, flux analysis on our presentation, or our Excel files. They can review some of these files for us. Can you help us out? And then you develop a rate, you start working together, and then you build that relationship. I'm sure they'd be interested in that type of arrangement. And I've seen firms do exactly that, but it isn't perceived as outsourcing. They're actually doing work for the firm, but it's the same thing, right? I mean, if you're doing an audit in Mexico or Colombia, I mean, you're leveraging the talent to do it. You don't have to fly down there. So that's one thing I think that gets overlooked in this process, at least to get started. Now, you might want to build your own in one of these places and start a relationship in that way. I'm sure the network association doesn't want you buying a firm and in their network, but it's a good starter. It's a good way to begin the process. And I think, like we talked about earlier, you're going to see the advantages of being in the same time zone, being a 2-hour flight away, and I think some of those cultural overlaps where Mexico and the U.S. have some similarities these days. So I think it's an opportunity.
Cool. Now, and as we start to wrap up, like, do you want to sort of put any last thoughts together from whether it's Mexico specifically or whether it's just LATAM in general, right, as to any nuances, any other benefits that you really think that firms should look at when they're exploring it? And then maybe just a final thought from yourself as well. If you could help along that journey for some others as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Laurence. I appreciate that. Well, I think if you take the 10,000 foot view from above, you'll see that right now there's a huge opportunity in Mexico and Latin America for business in general. As sanctions with China, conflicts around the world are happening, our largest trading partner, US, is now Mexico. So, you're going to see massive shift in the economies trying to get into the Mexican market, whether it's your clients, clients, or what have you. They're all moving in that direction. While at the same time, Mexico isn't able to handle all of that intake. So, they're going to lean on the rest of the region. And so you're going to see this pivot back from Asia to Latin America. And you're going to see a lot more opportunities and developments there with the US and the Americas. And I think that people would and businesses want to align with that as best they can. And I've been living and working in the region. I go there probably twice a year at a minimum for personal reasons, but also for business reasons several times a year. And I know the region well. I know a lot of the players. I know how to get business done in all these countries. So I'd love to help the accounting firms, networks, companies that are working in Latin America, help them with delivering on their strategy. And so through my consultancy, we can do a lot to help out these businesses.
Perfect. Thanks, Brendan. And just as a final thought overall, is this is a newer area, I feel like, for CPA firms and accounting firms. It's in terms of geographically, right? There is some, I'll say there are definitely some outsourcing firms that are already well established in Mexico, especially, right? I see firms exploring Colombia. I see firms exploring Argentina as an option as well now, right? I think one of the things to take into account is you have to be ready to invest. I've really found that many of the firms that are providing it, it's more of a staffing-based model, right? So you have to invest in terms of on a dedicated employee type model, right? It's not project-based in a lot of cases. There may be some that are now exploring that. Now they're building up some capacity. However, a lot of them are more staffing-based. And I think that's a better approach for the majority of firms anyway. But for anybody that has tried India or the Philippines, maybe it wasn't the best cultural fit for your firm, you want to try something new, this could be a more beneficial area for you to try out now, right? This may be a better fit. Or for those firms that already have established entities now in the Philippines and India, you should be looking at South America as well as one of those options as well. There's benefits to being in all these regions. But if you need any more answers specific to that, you can reach out to myself. You can reach out to Brendan. More specifically, you can go into way more detail than I could about that specific area, right? So that's the great thing for having him as a resource. And I look forward to seeing everybody again on the next episode of Business Beyond Borders. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laurence.
Thank you for tuning in to Business Beyond Borders. I'm Laurence Whittam, and it's been a pleasure bringing you impactful insights tailored for the modern CPA firm. Remember, the world of accounting is vast and ever evolving, and we're here to navigate it together. For more resources and episodes, don't forget to subscribe and reach out to our experts. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your business and explore the limitless possibilities beyond borders.